1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello, and welcome. Hello and welcome to the chat room. Hello and welcome to Chat Room, presented to you by China Global Television Network. I'm Yang Zhao, CGTN's reporter. It has been 10 days since Russia carried out a special military operation to neighboring Ukraine, and the chat room has been closely watching this conflict. And today I'll be joined by Ken Huang, chief editor of Russian service CGTN, Qiao Liang, CGTN politics specialist, and our military expert, Mr. Cao Weidong, to discuss the latest development. And also joining us later will be our analysts, reporters, and strainers in Russia and Ukraine and the rest of the world for deeper analysis on this issue. And I personally strongly recommend and welcome you to be part of this conversation by sending us the topic and the comments that you want us to talk in this chat room to strainer@cgtn.com. Strainer@cgtn.com. Our director will put us under this, and this is our goal, to build this chat room into a platform for everyone who can freely express your opinion. And we understand we may not agree with each other, even in this small chat room. Just like yesterday, we fought, we argue in this chat room about this issue, but it doesn't matter. This is the most valuable part of this conversation, and hopefully, during this process, we hope each one of us may have a full picture of this world. Okay, gentlemen, let's start today with the latest development. After a short period of ceasefire, during which some Ukrainians can evacuate to other countries, this attack has been resumed. Kremlin said on Saturday that over 2,000 military infrastructure in Ukraine have been destroyed. Ukrainian President Zelensky said Ukrainian forces were holding key cities in the central and southern and southeastern part of this country, and while the Russians were trying to block and keep encircle Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, and Sumy. So, gentlemen, what is your overall evaluation to the current situation? Qiao Liang, we could start from you.
Sure. I mean, it'd be fantastic, wonderful to see people back to the negotiation table. But however, seems like situation doesn't go that way. So at this moment, I only hope there won't be more civilian deaths, and people can, especially the both parties, can use more diplomatic operations instead of military operations to solve the crisis. And even in China, like I was reading a lot of posts by Chinese users last night, people all hope for peace.
但是另一方面呢，这个地面的这个军事冲突呢，这个目前呢还是很激烈的。
Exactly.
在南部地区。
But at the same time, we're looking at the ground conflict right now. It's still quite fierce, right? Especially at the southern part, at the very south part of Mariupol. Right now, we believe that the Russian troops actually is intending to really destroy the military defense from the counterpart. Mr. Cao, would you please, from the military professionals, to help us understand the overall strategy and tactic from the Russian side in the past 10 days?
So my English is not good enough, so I will speak Chinese.
OK， 没关系，您可以讲中文，讲中文 OK。
为了这个就是同传，那么 I will be speak slowly and loudly. 在过去的
So to give you a better understanding,
我们看到战局变化还是很大的。
So let me explain in Chinese. In the past 10 days, we look at quite a big change actually in this conflict ground. But you look at this operation actually is not the same as other operation. It's not a really large scale, massive invasion. Actually, you're looking at this kind of situation in the previous years. No matter what kind of difficulty in front of them, no matter it's city or urban places or rural places, in order to take more land, need to really move in a large scale and very fast. But this is quite different this time. Yes, indeed, you mentioned this like the operation. It's like a surgery operation. The front field or the backfield. This is a military operation. It's happened just a very short time. But in day 2, day 3, you look at the Russian troops actually already siege Kiev, the capital city. So it's moving really fast, and there's no really like the defined line first, line 2, line 3. So this is really just in a sudden to your capital. So what's your take about this right now, the current situation, siege? They just encircle the capital city. Of course, we have seen some conflict happened, but there's no big, a massive or fear battle. So what are they waiting for?
Earlier, the camp said that Kiev may not be the real target of the Russian troops, right? 就是之前那个黄老师也是提到过，基辅也许不是他的一个。
Yes, maybe it's not their main target. So what's your take, Mr. Cao? As the special military operation for Russian side, I believe that the first station troops to your capital, the outskirts of your capital, actually the purpose is want to use this kind of situation to bring the other side back to the negotiation table. So against this backdrop, they would like to promote a negotiation. I believe this is one of the main purposes. So, which means that the Russian side is more for the political purpose, for the foreign affairs purpose. So, force the Ukraine back to the negotiation table, talk to Russia. Right? Yes, indeed. It's a special military operation, but we still need to mention this is quite different from others' military operations. But two things actually remain the same. One, military operation, actually that's the extension of a policy or political purpose. It's not other than political purpose. It's not for just for a war. Actually, still, looking at the from Russian side, that's the expansion for NATO, and this is not really for a war purpose, still for political side. And the other thing is, if you cannot get from your field on the ground, you cannot get the same thing on your negotiation table. So looking at today, right now, 2 rounds of peace talk, we can see something change.
Yeah, for your references, Chao Liang, you may want to give us a little bit more background of this about this conflict. As Mr. Cao said, this is for political purposes behind this.
Yeah. Can I ask Professor Cao questions in Chinese? May I?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I want to have a follow-up question. We talk about right now it's a circulation at Kiev, which actually brings the inconvenience to people living inside Kiev, and also looking at people waiting in the long queue, waiting to withdraw money. We talk about one refugee want to leave Kiev.
It could take.
You have to be in charge of translate by yourself.
All right.
We're not going to pay. We're not going to pay the translator for you.
No, please don't. Okay, my fault. All right, so it says that it takes more than 9 hours for Ukrainians to leave its country. So my question is, what would be the ultimate goal for Russia's encirclement of Kiev? By all means, it's the largest city and the capital city of the country. Yeah.
Indeed, if we pay a notice that we can see more and more troops right now at the outskirts of Kiev, and right now both sides reach an agreement regarding the humanitarian corridor, right? So which means that this is a valuable way for people in Kiev. If you think right now the living environment is a big threat to you, then here you go. This is the corridor, the pathway for you to leave Kiev. Which means if the people in Kiev right now leaving the place, then the result of negotiation, or we talk about if these right now the condition cannot help Russia meet its goal, then the military operation will be conducted in Kiev, this largest city, which means a lot of the cultural relics, buildings will be damaged. But still, we talk about the ultimate goal is not to want to kill people, don't want to kill the troops. In the end, back to the negotiation table. Yes, indeed. For Kiev, or Kharkiv, these kind of big cities, we don't want to see the large scale of a disaster or the humanitarian catastrophe. we for sure don't want to see that. But on the other hand, for myself, my understanding for the humanitarian corridor, let's see the final results. Actually, I have a big doubt on this corridor. So this is a fear, like a battle right now going on. If you just open a humanitarian corridor, then this may be utilized for a military purpose, right? Of course, it is really for a good purpose, for greater good, but let's see who will utilize it for other purpose. Let's say take this opportunity because right now it's a window for a temporary ceasefire, then maybe it's a place to transfer the supply of weaponry or maybe bring troops through this corridor. So who knows? So I have a big question on this humanitarian corridor. Let's wait and see.
And gentlemen, how do you evaluate the defense of Ukraine so far? Because the Kremlin said on Saturday that over 2,000 military infrastructure inside in Ukraine has been destroyed. 这应该是2067个军事目标已经被打击了。这个数量对于乌克兰军队来讲是一个什么样的比例？这种现在的这个进攻的这个程度，对他是可以说是致命的吗？
So I want to emphasize that military operation actually still want to bring everyone back to the table, right? So more than 2,000 military infrastructure right now been damaged, just finished. Initial goal from the Russian side, right? Their expectation not to really totally invade or occupy the Ukraine country. You're looking at actually the eastern side and the southern side, and the other battlefield is the north part, Kiev and Kharkiv. You're looking at these are the three key areas. Why? Because they want, for example, the eastern part, that Lugansk, Donetsk, these two areas to expand the actual territory of these two places, and at the south, that's the coastal cities. So when you negotiate or when they end the military operation, then you could see that Ukraine will be an inland country, right? And the eastern countries of Ukraine or eastern places of Ukraine right now, these two independent people's republics, these two are actually already become the independent places and quite close to Russia. And this is just the very first step of military goal, so which means NATO, they cannot do Eastern War, and also Ukraine cannot join NATO. So this is the very initial goal from the Russian side, and we can see this is maybe the result of their first step. On top of that, let's continue our peace talk. So for Russia, I believe this is really helpful because this is a buffer zone for them. President Putin also mentioned that yesterday, actually. The special military operation right now coming to the end. So based on the Russian side's evaluation, so demilitarization in Ukraine, we can see right now that anything that can impose threat to Russia basically dismantled or disabled. And also according to MOD from the Russian side, after 9 days of special military operation, right now the marine troops is 100% disabled, 70% of the air defense capability also the policies. And also we could see that the majority of their military capability right now is not in a good position. And we can see right now the cities right now under the targets as 40% of the total territory of Ukraine. And also as Mr. Cao mentioned, still right now focus on the two cities in the north, eastern and southern part. A lot of people believe Ukraine side, let's say, is no really the capability to fight back, but still that's a very dynamic situation in the battlefield, right? The Western world is still right now sending military weaponry to Ukraine. So looking at the HIMARS to the attack weaponry, missiles, right? And also especially that the Germany also sent the 30 years old storage to Ukraine. as Mr. Huang mentioned, that maybe they're not really capable to fight back, but still we're looking at they still even send vessels to Ukraine, and also all these weaponry supplies on their way to Ukraine. At the same time, you're looking at Ukraine. Not to really have a large number of casualties. If they have this new supply, this new blood actually injected to the Ukraine troops. And right now, there are more than 10,000 troops, right? Like 16,000 militia. So it's time for them to take the counter fight. But still, it's not really reality. In reality, you're looking at this is not really strong enough to fight back against Russia. This time, yes, indeed, the Russians had really restrained their movement. They're looking at a lot of really attacks or assault. It's just like step by step, one bite by one bite. So there's not really conducted the massive attack, because the massive attack we talk about, like in Iraq and also for the other previous wars that all happened. But still, you can see Russian this time, they just use the high precision weapon, so really targeted way, really restrain themselves. And as Mr. Sam mentioned, Ukraine is a quite strong military country, actually. If you only look at their ground troops, put under the context of Europe, actually they can rank very top in terms of military capability. So I can tell right now everything based on the Russian schedule. So far, I think they reached their goals.
Would you please just give us a little bit more background about this conflict, what causes what triggered this conflict so far?
The whole conflict, sure. I think it's still fundamentally the source for these violent actions or the expansion of NATO. Right? There's no doubt.
Yep.
So this is why earlier we were talking about how to define this special military operation. Right? So Russia is actually fighting and moving forward in Ukraine, but also Russia was defending its own self from the expansion of NATO.
So you think that was just a reaction of the Russian to the expanding of the NATO?
Exactly, because the expansion of NATO has actually changed the nature of NATO after the Cold War, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. That's why Russia was so alerted and alarmed. Right, that's Russia call it. This is the red line. Ukraine cannot become a member of NATO or part of these U.S.-led military alliance or whatsoever.
So I really want to ask you, what is your takes on the current situation? I know you're not a military expert,
no,
but I still want to hear your view on this current situation. Do you think will it be followed by a larger operation? And
what is interesting is I noticed about the sanctions against Russia, but the sanctions earlier I was thinking is also a double-edged sword. On one hand, sanctions actually is and probably is going to cause more domestic dissatisfactions against Russian government among Russian people. But however, on the other hand, we can see the sanctions actually by so far the conflict has caused the surge and rises of gas and oil prices, which also is causing dissatisfactions among American people. Right, so this is actually definitely the sanctions is a double-edged sword that is hurting nearly everyone.
对，显然这个制裁呢，
Yes,
实
I
际上
agree
这个
with
对
you.
欧洲来讲
For these sanctions, actually, big impact to European countries. We know actually European countries highly depend on Russia, especially LNG and oil resources, and also Russia actually exporting a lot of products to European countries. So this morning I've looked at the natural gases actually reached $2,400 per metric meter.
Yeah, the price is soaring.
Yeah. Plus, we are dealing with a economic recovery from global pandemic.
Yep.
So this price rise can be particularly hurtful for nearly every consumer. Right?
So 那么
So Mr.
曹老师
Cao,
像
they
刚才他们所
mentioned
说的，
that
有
for
这种制裁啊，包括我们
sanctions,
整个
we
经
know
济现在其实并
from
不好。
other countries, and also right
那
now
么这
all
个后
countries
续
under the
您觉
big
得
blow
会
of
再爆发
COVID-19.
更大规模的
Do you
这个
think
战
there
争吗？
will
就是
be
这个
another
这种
round of
这种
even
对抗性
stronger
的这种军事行动会
conflicts,
进一
military
步的升级吗？
conflicts?
我认为会
The
的，
tension
因
will
为刚才
escalate.
前
I
面两位
believe
老
so.
师都讲了，就
As
是
the
经
other
济
two
上
gentlemen
会
mentioned,
由于
economic
这场军事行动
sanctions
受到
because
巨大
of
的
the
影响。
military
那么我们
operations will
看
be
就是这场军事行动
stronger.
并
And
没有
also we're
就是
looking
到
at
达
right
俄罗
now,
斯所要
Russia
求的
not
这个
or
目
haven't
的，也就是说
yet
现在
reached its
双方的
goal.
谈判尽管已
So
经
we
开始
know
了，
the
而且
talks right now
下
is
一轮就是第
undergoing,
三
and
轮
very
已经
soon
开
we will
始。
expect
那
the
么
third
是不是
round.
能够在第三轮就能够
happen.
结束
But
啊？
let's
就是
see.
这场军事行动，我认为
The
不
third
可
round
能，
will
因
not
为
be
现在
the
双方
last
首先
one.
就是他们
So
谈判的
first of
这
all,
个
the
各
both
自的
sides,
诉
they
求
have their
是
preconditions
相
put
距
it on the
甚远，
table.
不可能
Actually,
在第三次的这个谈判
nothing
中就解
really
决。那么
aligned,
既然如此，
and nothing
这个
could
外
be
来的影
solved
响也
in the
很
third
大，
round,
特别
and that
是北
actually
约
also
它
have
的
big
这种
impact
军
to
事的
other
行动，
countries,
就是它
especially
不是
NATO.
直接参战，
Why?
而是说呢，它
NATO
要
not
把它
really
的武器
involved
装备
directly in
提
this
供给
military
乌克兰
operation,
啊。
but
那这
they
样一来呢，
provide
就是战
military
争拖
weaponry.
延，使
They
这个军
prefer
事
a
行动
prolonged war,
这
right?
个冲
Prolonged
突上
conflict.
升。
So
所以我
by
们看
doing so,
现在无
actually,
论是
they
美
help
国
to
还是北约
escalate this
都
military
实际上画了一个
operation.
波折号，
So
希望
NATO
拖延
and
这场军事
US
行动，
want to
而不是尽
prolong
快的
these
结
war.
束
They
这
don't
场
want
军事
to
行动。那么既
Russian
然
side
如
end
此，
these
军事
conflicts
行动
in the
要
early
继
days.
续进
So
行下去，
under this
那
context,
这个就是对经济上
if
的依
the
赖和
military
支撑
operation
一
still
定
going
是巨
on,
大的
then
啊。
that will
无论
bring a
是这个武器
continuous
装备的
damage
提
to
供，还
economy.
是这个伤
We
亡
talk
人
about
员的
looking at
救
the
治，
casualties,
还有就是
medical
难民
treatments,
的接收，
refugee
这种
issues,
这
refugee
些问题
crisis,
都
all
会影
these
响到
issues
整
for
个
sure
后续的
impact
啊，就是整个的欧洲的安全局势、
the
经济
safety,
局势，
security,
包括外
economic
交的这种格
performance,
局的变化。
a
所以我们说，
foreign
就
affair
是在
landscape
谈
in
判
European
目前
countries. We
看不
talk
到
about
一
right
个
now, we not
比较明
really
显的成
see
果的
a
情况下，
obvious
军
progress
事
from
行
the
动一
negotiation
定会
table.
继续，
Then
军事
the
行
military
动一
operation
定会
must
升
going
级。
on and
但是
tension
呢，
must
这个
escalate.
从俄罗斯的角度
From
来
Russian
看
side,
他当然不希望这
of
个战
course,
争
they
长
don't
期
want to
化
see
是吧
this war
尤其是
continue
像
for a
面临
longer
乌克兰
time,
这样的国家，
especially
是吧
when they
这个
face Ukraine,
如
this
果
kind of
陷入这个
country.
治安战是吧，或者
If
是这
they
个游
fall
击战是吧，
into
对俄罗斯
the
来讲，
a
这个
street
负
by
担是相
street
当沉重
battle,
的啊。
then the
所以呢，
Russians
这也是
will
为
pay
什么
a
我们
big
像刚才我们
cost.
都谈到啊，这个俄军呢想通过
So that
军
is
事这
why
个行动这种
the
手段
Russian side want
逼
to
迫乌克兰
use
方向坐下
this
来
military
谈判，然
operation
后达到
to
他的政治
force
外交
Ukraine
目的
side
啊。
to back
但
to
是
the
呢，现在乌克
negotiation
兰方
table
面呢
so the
是
Russian side
在
can
其
meet
实
its
延缓
goal,
这一进程，
but
是吧？
the
所以呢，它
Ukraine
会
side
遭
right
遇
now
非常
they
顽强的
drag
抵抗啊，
this
这个
war to a
比较
longer
重。所
time.
以我非常同意
This is really
刚
within
才这个
everyone's
曹老师的说
expectation.
法
I
啊，
totally
下一
agree
步啊
with Mr.
有
Cao.
可能
So
这个
going
军事行动
forward, we
啊
could
有可
see
能
that
还会升级
escalation of
啊，
tensions,
尤其是在个别地
especially in
区。
certain
And
cities.
especially when the sanctions from the West and especially the ammunition, weaponry support from the West has already fueled this escalation of this conflict. There 就是我是不是可以看，是不是可以看
Can
成
we
他们的这个
understand that
提供这
the
些
supply of
火力给乌
weaponry
克兰
and
的这种行
military
为，其实是
weapons
在进一步的让这个
right now
冲突延
bring
续下去。
these conflicts going
maybe-
further?
Shall I say something?
Sure. Reported by American media earlier today, saying that the U.S. government is helping Ukraine to acquire Soviet-era MiG fighters, 米格战斗机. So because you just said I'm not an expert in military, so
okay.
yeah, so I'm confused. First of all, do both of you think this is going to help Ukraine? Secondly, why can't the U.S. government sending the more advanced fighters to help Ukraine to just why just helping them to get old second-hand used MiG fighters?
这曹老师先对，行。
实际上啊，我们现在从消息
Based
上看
on
呢
the sources
好
of
像俄罗斯有
information,
一些战机被
Russia's
击
the
落。那么
aircraft
我也
or
注意到
battle
被击落的
airplane
战机呢，
taken
主要
down.
是
You're
强
looking
击
at
机啊。所谓强击机，主要是执行对陆
this is
攻击的
the
任务。
the
显然
airflight
它在
is
执行
under the
任务
mission
就比
to
如说
attack targeted a ground target.
这个乌方的这个
So
报道，
from
就
the
是我们
Ukraine
击落
side,
了俄罗斯的
they
这
shot
种
down
米两应该是米格两三四
MiG
对苏34
苏
34
和
对
米格两
Su-34
Su-35对
and MiG-25. These kind of
对
aircraft
陆地攻击的这种战机
are basically
而不是中国
designated
空优
for
就是比
the
如说
ground
像这
target.
个米格31
MiG-31
米格两苏两七
or
或者是这个
Su-27 or the most advanced Su-57. Actually, there's more strong in the air defense, or the really want to get the overall control of the air. So right now, you can see Ukraine right now ask United States or NATO to really have a no-fly zone, right? We talk about no-fly zone means that there's no other country, especially from Russia, to fly over, but it's allowed to open the airspace to the allies. If, say, the aircraft or fighters from NATO, from the United States, or they use air defense missiles to take down Russia's aircraft, and that's directly involved in this war. So they don't want to see that. That is why you could see that they only provide weaponry. We talk about the shutdown of Russian aircraft, which means they used aircraft to shoot the artillery, a target on the ground, or provide support to the Russian side artillery movement. We can see first, right now, the whole airspace fully controlled by Russia, and the ground movements still continue. Let's continue our topic. Ukraine's response, I think, within our expectation, because Ukraine believe that right now we under attack. The other country right now is invading us, so we should get capital support. We need to get military weaponry assistance, and also the primary. The president also signed a decree allowed the visa-free for the Western countries military personnel, which means they still have willingness to fight back against Russia. As Mr. Sao mentioned, that based on the news information from the Ukraine side, they shot down the aircraft from Russia. I believe that's quite a surprise to me. So Su-34 actually is a fighter. It's a long-range fighter. We don't know exactly their plan in overall, why they use these kind of aircraft to participate in the ground movement. So I don't know whether that reflects certain problem from their military tactics.
That was a very informative discussion, and I was told that we have short films to be shown to you, which has been filmed by our CGTN strainer, Alex Danilov, who has been shooting this film about this day in Ukraine. I believe it is in the city of Kiev. So let's see what is the real life now in Kiev.
Here in Kiev, today we will spend the whole day with you, and I will demonstrate you the situation that we have here. We can go outside, it's still safe. We used to go outside to buy some food, something that we need. You can see the weaponed people. These people are our protection. That is a squad that we support with anything we can. My neighbor in next door, he have left with his children and with his wife to Eastern Ukraine. It's more safe place. So he asked me to turn off his water. We are worrying about our flats because we hope to return here again, and we want to live here again in the same way we lived before. But who knows? None. Our are still open. So we are still here, but not for very long time seems. Here you can see our place where we hide at night and even at day. We always try to be as far from windows as we can. Family is waiting for food, and this is the meal time, evening. You can see the kitchen while my wife is preparing food, and we have to prepare this food without light. My wife says that it's not so easy to make a good dish without seeing anything. We try to imagine that our dinner with candles, like romantic, but it's the needed stuff because we can't turn on the light because our windows can attract. This is a rest time, and we gather together in this safe place because at this time the most dangerous situation can happen because we have alarms and bombing in the evening. You can't believe how it's beautiful to listen to the silence around. That's a wonderful feeling that everything is safe. That night we have only one alarm, and we can name this night as silent night. So we had a chance to spend some time in bed, and now you can see in the morning we are looking to the windows again and watching to the new day. Now we are here in Kiev. Today we will.
Yeah, gentlemen, I don't know what you feel, but I'm impressed with Alex is saying that he enjoy a wonderful night without alarming. But we know this film has been made last night. So, but today the ceasefire is over, so the situation might change. Right now, joining us online, we have the more seasoned reporter, strainer, and analyst with us today. Now we have Dalia Platonova, the geopolitical analyst. You see, hello, Dalia, and also Bogdan Trihake, is our CGTN strainer from Ukraine, and also Daniel Hawkins, Moscow-based correspondent. Hi, everyone. Hello and welcome to the chat room, and you'll be joined with our guest today in Beijing. Dalia, the Russian President Vladimir Putin held talks with the Israeli Prime Minister Bennett in Moscow, and also Bennett spoke with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Our guest from the Moscow, can you share with us some more details about this?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Actually, they were speaking about the possibilities of the humanitarian corridor somehow from Russia to Israel. So there was a discussion not only about the Ukraine, but the possibility of the immigration of some persons who has also the Israeli citizenship to Israel. So this was one of the points. And actually, the Prime Minister of Israel was his aim was to be a mediator in this conflict, and now we see that a lot of new players are stepping into the platform of the mediation. So he met Putin, and then he had the conversation with Olaf Scholz in Berlin, Mr. Naftali Bennett, and then also he's planning to play a huge role in the conflict. And the launch of Mr. Bennett to these talks was actually launched by Mr. Zelensky. So he was calling, according to Financial Times, he was calling the Prime Minister of Israel to be a mediator in these talks. And to see the relations between Putin and Bennett, they are quite good and stable, and actually they are quite neutral. And we can say that it is a part which is representing that Israel is a part now, which is clearly representing the globalist world or anti-globalist. I think this is a neutral territory, a neutral compromise ideological thing. So I think
Daniel,
this also can.
Yeah, Daniel, what's your reaction to this, to the talk between the Russian president and Israeli prime minister, and what's your takes on the Zelensky's requirements of Mr. Bennett to be the mediator of this conflict?
Well, as the conflict has drawn out, I think it's become very clear that it needs mediation, external mediation from third parties, and we've obviously seen those talks, as my colleagues said there, between Mr. Putin, Mr. Bennett. We understand he's also in talks with the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's often actually acted as a mediator, as a go-between in other conflicts as well, namely the Russian involvement in Syria, as well as others. Zelensky, of course, of Ukraine has called for direct talks with Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin has so far rejected that. There's been 2 rounds of talks, of course, between the Russian and Ukrainian negotiators in Belarus. We are hearing reports there will be a 3rd round of talks tomorrow on Monday. It is clear, though, that outside mediation is needed, and it's figures like the Israeli Prime Minister, the President of Turkey, as well as perhaps other global players like China, who are going to be very much key in finding some sort of compromise and getting all sides back to the negotiating table.
Yeah. Oh, Daniel, what's that sound? Can you? We heard something, right?
Yeah.
Daniel, can you? Daniel, what was the sound?
That wasn't from me. That sound.
Okay. Okay, Daniel. So, gentlemen, why Israel? Why Israel's come out in this whole picture?
当然。 听到这个消息以后，第一个
So
反应
after I heard
感
this
觉
news,
就是这个
the
以色列
first thing
呢，
coming to my
俄
mind
罗斯和乌克兰
the
呢都保持
relation
非常良好
between
的关系。
Israel
另外呢，
and
以色列呢还是美国
Ukraine
的盟
actually
友。
is very good,
这
and
从这
also
个角度
Israel
讲
is the
可能以色列
one
呢
of
是
the
比较合
allies
适
with
做这
United
个
States.
和
So
谈的这个中
Israel
介
really good as
另
a
一方面
mediator.
呢
On the
也
other
看到
side,
这个
we
以色
also
列
need to
啊
see
几乎
that
有3分之一
Israel
的
actually
这样的
1/3 of
来
its
自
population coming from the
包括
post-Soviet
移民
Union
都是
places,
乌
and
克
a
兰
lot of
的
migrants
以
from
色列
Ukraine
那么这些
and
人呢
Russia
在以色列
to
政坛上
Israel,
呢
and all
逐
these
渐的也
people
是
right
发
now
挥了一定影
started
响力
to
所以这一
have
次
their
呢，这个
influence
泽连斯
in
基
the
总统
political
呢
affairs.
提出来
So
成为以色
President
列呢
Zelensky
作为
this
这
time
个和谈的
mentioned
中
the
介
wants the
可能
Israeli
也有
prime
这方面的
minister
一些考
as
量
the
这是我个人的一
mediator.
个
I
判断
think this is based on all these considerations.
Okay, Boden, can you hear me? Boden?
Yes.
Hi. We have this report that Ukrainian delegation confirmed on March 5 local time that a 3rd round of Russian-Ukrainian talks would be held on March 7, still in Belarus. Is there any reaction from Ukraine about the 3rd, or expectation about a 3rd round of peace talk, based on your, based on social media or
yes,
people
thank
around
you for the
Yeah.
question. Firstly, I wanted to mention that the negotiation took and most likely will take place not in Belarus exactly as it was during the Minsk agreements, but on the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. That's important because we choose it as a neutral territory. Secondly, I'd like to tell that as a Ukrainian and as a lot of my friends told me, we would not expect much from that because we see that Russia's demands are too high. They demand us to recognize the occupied Crimea, the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, which are not recognized by any country in the world, probably just by Abkhazia, as I heard. So, like puppet states created by Russia to make Prидnestrovia recognize them too. And yes, we think that Russia will push its propagandist agenda, and that unfortunately for us, because I wanted to mention that Zelensky addressed to the Russian President Vladimir Putin that I'm citating, "I am a man, I am brave, please sit down and talk to me." But as we all know, Vladimir Putin renounced to talk with or with our Ukrainian president, and even though there are some mediators who tried to reach out and connect with the two presidents, we see that this is in vain due to Kremlin's position, because Erdogan, the president of Turkey, said that he would talk to Putin. As you see, the Israeli Prime Minister Bennett, he also would like the two presidents to meet and to discuss the situation, but Putin just sends the representatives without the direct confrontation.
Okay, Boden. There's a lot of discussion about you and Dalia. Yesterday you talked about the nature of this conflict. we understand that the Ukrainian people think it's the war, and also the Russian side said is the military operation. So, Dalia, do you want to say something about this?
Yes, I wanted to add some points about mediating of the conflict. As Bogdan said, now the different countries are interested in being the negotiators and the mediators for the peace talks. So I think this is important because who will be in the position of the negotiator, who will be the mediator, and who will actually somehow influence on the peace process, Erdogan or Israeli Prime Minister or I don't know, Pakistani, Chinese, that will be the person who actually will be one of the leader of a new world. So this is very important. So we can see also a side of the conflict of Russia and Ukraine. We see also this geopolitical some kind of new map. So the country which will be the initiator of these peace negotiations and who will win in these peace negotiations, for example, as Macron wanted to be before the beginning of the conflict, that will be the winner, and everybody now understands it. What we can say now is that Europe can't be no more this head of this peace. US also, and they doesn't want to play an active role in the conflict, and I think the role of the mediator, the role of a person who will do the peace talks and who will be the leader of this peace process between installing the peace between Ukraine and Russia lies in the East. I think that can be China. I think that can be the countries of the Middle East, but primarily that can be Turkey as a leader, regional leader, a leader who is interested in the security in the region of the Black Sea. And also I wanted to add one thing about the peace negotiations. Actually, the member of the Ukrainian delegation was shot yesterday in Kiev. We can see him in the photos of the peace talks. He was in the delegation of Ukraine, and yesterday there was a murder. This was Denis Kireev. He was 45. Actually,
he was sabotage.
Yeah, actually there are two versions which we can see now, and I wanted also to ask Bogdan, because from one side we see the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine who says that it was their employer. From the other side, what I have been watching in the media of Ukraine, he was characterized as a traitor, and actually we have two information about who he was from media, which claims to be him to be a traitor, and from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. So the situation is very complicated, and only one thing I want. So I forward my question to Bogdan because it's interesting how it's seen in Ukraine. And the second thing is that this is my point of view. This is the point that if there are such problems in the delegations of Ukraine, that really poses a problem. This reminds me a bit Syria. I was in Syria several times, and I remember how President Assad was describing the different terroristic organizations there who cannot have the compromise, and that was the problem, because there was the civilians who were in opposition, and they were quite in a bad and conflict situation with the elements who were like terroristic brigades there, also with the opposition party. So there was some kind of anarchy. This is my opinion about the current Kiev situation. I think that there are a lot of clients, like for example, as we were speaking yesterday, Zelensky is not a Nazi for sure, but still in the country there are the elements of radical nationalism, but there are also the elements of pro-Russian, pro-Russian, and there are anti-Russian elements. This I can absolutely understand. So there are a lot of different intentions. So if it's possible, I would like to forward to Bogdan the question about this person, the Kireev Denis Borisovich, who was officially by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, their employer from the other side in the Ukrainian media.
You want to reply?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your question, Daria. I'd like to say that I don't know where you take your sources. According to the official information published by Verkhovna Rada, our parliament, he was found of sabotage. He we found out that he was a diversionist. That's why he was shot. He was killed. Yes, because we're in a position of war. We're being attacked directly by Russia. Russian troops are within our territory. That's why we are in a special wartime position. There is a martial law, not only for high official representatives, but for ordinary people too. Like according to some documents that Mr. Zelensky signed, looting troops can be also shot at, because it is not okay to do such thing in a wartime. Secondly, I'd like to address some words said by Daria, that Zelensky, and I wanted to open this question, that Zelensky is not fully represented in Ukraine, which is also not true, because Zelensky nowadays gives a lot of speeches, talks to journalists. Yesterday, Kiev time, he talked to the representatives of both parties of the US via Zoom, according to the Ukrainian Western news like Ukrinform, the Economic Times, and the official site of Ukrainian president. We've also wanted to talk about the question, where is Zelensky? And I understand that a lot of people are concerned with the current physical position of our president, but I also wanted to cite you Felix René Vasquez, the representative of the U.S. government, who said that the U.S. government offered to evacuate Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky from Kiev, but he declined. He also told that he needs weapons, not a right, as the citation goes. So we see that again, one more time, he's a brave person who is ready to defend its own country, our country, from Russian invasion, and that we see it totally different from the picture that is represented by Daria and the Russian propagandist channel, which are the only source of information nowadays, we should mention, because the channels that do not agree with the official position.
And Daniel, you can jump in anytime you want.
Medusa is banned. Sorry?
Now I'm talking to Daniel and another guest in this chat room. Everyone, you can jump in this conversation anytime you want. You don't have to wait for my question, or you don't have to wait for this. Go ahead. Oh, Ken, you want to say something?
Oh, yeah. May I have a question to Bogdan?
Yes.
Hello. Oh, okay. Okay. How are you, Bogdan? I have a question. So, what are your thoughts, and how do you think about the third round negotiations as a Ukrainian? So, what's the important point or agreement will be in the third round negotiations? How do you think about that?
Thank you for the question. As I've already said, I doubt they will be productive, as the Russian president declines to meet directly with our president, Vladimir Zelensky. He just sends the representatives, which are aiming at peace from our side, but one more time from Russian side that demands something that we will never do, like define Ukraine's border within the Russian propagandist views, which are without Crimea, without Donbass. So of course we will never agree to that, because freedom is more valuable for us than peace. That's why, of course, we'd like to have peace, but I don't see this as an available option nowadays.
And Mr. Hawkins still stand by with us? Yeah?
Daniel?
Daniel?
Yes.
Are you there? Oh, so
yes, hi.
Is there any information from Russian side about the third round negotiations?
I think the best case scenario, from what I've heard from all sides for the third round, is trying to establish, as we discussed earlier, humanitarian corridors. Right now, that's the key thing to establish, especially around the southern areas of Ukraine, that key port city, Melitopol, the towns around as well, where we are seeing people running out of basic supplies, running out of medication. Those humanitarian corridors were agreed upon in the second round, and that was viewed as at least some sort of progress by all sides. They unfortunately broke down over the last 24 hours. Both sides have accused each other The Russian side has accused far-right groups of sabotaging them. Kiev has accused the Russians of using the ceasefire allegedly to advance and improve their military positions and move forward. It is certainly that will be one of the priorities, I think, before we get to some of the very key demands that certainly Moscow is demanding, as Bogdan said there, the recognition of Crimea, the recognition of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics. That certainly is extremely far off in these negotiations that we're seeing at this sort of level, not on the level of ministers or indeed the two presidents directly. I think there is certainly a huge way to go before any further progress can be considered.
Yeah.
And Daniel, why do you think? I want to hear your takes on the first two rounds of the peace talk. We're hoping for a third one, but we also see there's a very limited outcomings from the first two round of peace talks. So why do you think it's?
Well, as Bogdan said, I think the demands by the Russian side are, at this stage at least, viewed as unacceptable by the Ukrainian side. The Russian side has made their demands very clear. As I said, the recognition of Crimea within Russian borders as part of Russia, the recognition of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics as independent, and in addition to that, of course, a neutral status by Ukraine guarantees that they will not join NATO, that they'll not be a NATO member. Ukraine, of course, wants the freedom and independence and choice to decide that for themselves, and that's also been backed up by NATO, by Jens Stoltenberg, who said that it is up to every country to choose their own NATO membership. NATO will always have an open door policy and won't be pushed by anyone into changing that. These are really key points that were on the table, not only before the war in Ukraine began, but in the negotiations we saw between Western states, the US and NATO, and Moscow in the weeks leading up to it. Moscow famously sent a document with all of its security concerns, all of its security interests to its NATO partners. The answers it received, according to Moscow, were not satisfactory, were not acceptable. And certainly the line of Moscow, of the Russian government, is that was one of the things that pushed them into, as Putin said, a so-called hard decision to launch this military action in Ukraine. So I think the demands at this stage by Moscow will be hard to accept for Kiev, for the representatives of negotiations. The key thing is to stop the active fighting and to save lives at this stage, to make sure civilians can get out and receive the treatment and the aid that they're so very much in need of.
Well, like President Putin said, it was a hard decisions to make, but now we still see this presence of the Russian troops in Ukraine. So the media coverage on this conflict has been very. We see a variety of this description on this conflict. Say it's a war, it's the crisis, it's the conflict. What's your take? 我们的嘉宾们，你们怎么想这个问题
？So 其实刚才这个像
as Mr. Bogdan and Bookings and Daniel mentioned. From the expectation, I really found a lot of reasons, and you also can tell there are big difference in their conditions or requirements. Still, let's need to see the relation between NATO and Russia. Ukraine, actually, in this battle, just one country above the surface of the water. Actually, you need to look into the deep of the water, then that's between Russia and NATO. Of course, the eastward expansion by NATO, that's one of the key reasons for the military conflicts. After the Cold War, the United States actually made a big strategic era use this kind of way to further expansion to protect itself, security. I believe this is something really wrong for the U.S. side. We talk about the indivisible security, which means our safety cannot be on the cost of others' security.
What is your opinion on this slightly different description on this conflict? Someone says.
Sure. I mean, like I mentioned before, if you are using the word such as military operation, means just you have a target and you are taking actions. But some of the U.S. media, they prefer to use the word invasion, which is a word that means action with emotional feelings. Right? So This is definitely.
所以俄罗斯是没有带着
So
任何
which
情绪
means
发
that
动军事
there's
战
no
争，军事
emotion
行动吗？
or the sentiment behind this military
or at least
mission.
They have their own legitimate claim for taking such actions. However, obviously, there's a disagreement between the two sides, the West and Russia. Yeah.
Mr. Cao? Yes, our guests talk about that equality or equal footing. Why choose the Israeli PM Prime Minister as the mediator or choose a place that equal to all that reflects their fairness and equality? Of course, there's no 100% fairness and equality. Both sides believe that Israel, both sides can accept as the mediator. At the same time, the United States actually expelled the Russian people, in total 12 people, as person non grata. Is that reflect something we call the equal footing or fairness? That they are the people work for United Nations, not work for United States. Then your move from U.S. side, is that reflect the fairness and justice and equality? And we also need to look at that a legitimate right and interest, or anything legitimate reason, or anything you can justify your military operation. We need to look at one special condition. This is a special military operation. At the time when it launched, the United States and EU conducted a very extreme sanctions on Russia's economy, which made Russia under a big economic turmoil. But that also brought the further damage to other countries, like say ROK. Actually, they had a quite good economic relation with Russia, but right now, because the resources, energy resources price going up, and they bought a lot of the offshore, the oil platform, and they actually produce a lot of these kind of the equipment for Russia. But right now, because of the sanction, they cannot really pay ROK by the Russian side. And also we look at the military operation itself. We need to look at it supported by economic performance. And right now, because of sanctions, which means Russia right now, these limbs right now is bounded. It's like two people fight, but one people actually just the ropes and the limbs then just use hand to knock the other one. So this is not really giving you a big punch, right? Or kick you by the foot. Just use my forefront, my forehand, just knock you with blood. So this is kind of situation right now going on. So for myself, right now, the peace talk, actually myself not really optimistic. Although it's right now coming to the third round, I believe not really a lot of progress from these peace talks. Talking about the reasons, one, two sides have a big differences in reaching consensus among all the conditions right now they are putting on the table. The Russian side asks Ukraine to maintain as the neutral state, and also need to recognize the authority and independence of Crimea and the two republics, right? Of course, Ukraine side says big no. And Ukraine side asks the Russian side to totally withdraw its troops, especially from the Donbas region. Right? This is something also receive a big no from the Russian side. Right now, come to the third round of negotiation. And both sides will talk more regarding the fundamental issues. We talk about the humanitarian assistance. I believe so. Let's see whether they can reach some common ground. Let's say if in Turkey, both countries' foreign affairs minister can meet, then we can have some hope.
Okay, Dalia, you still with us?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, Ken says it's not very hopeful for the third round of the peace talk. What's your take? And how long do you think this conflict will last, or this operation will last? Will this end very shortly, or is going to become a long-term operation?
I think it's becoming more and more long-term operation, and actually the Ukrainian side also is trying to gain time with even the talks when the delegation is coming for a long time from Ukraine, using Poland for its security. And actually I remember the first round of the talks when there were Russian delegation, which was not sleeping during all night in order to wait.
Dalia.
Yes?
I was just told that Daniel is going to live with us, so I want to keep this time for him. Hi, Daniel. Hi,
Sure.
Daniel. Yeah, the same question to you. Do you think these things will be end very soon, or is this going to be turned into a longer term of the conflict?
Well, I don't think a long, protracted conflict or protracted war is in anybody's interests, least of all, of course, first and foremost, the Ukrainian people, for obvious reasons. Also for Moscow, of course. There are billions of dollars being spent weekly on this war. Protracted fighting, of course, risks damaging the Kremlin's reputation not only abroad, but more importantly, domestically. The Vietnam syndrome, body bags coming home, with the Russian Ministry of Defense has admitted hundreds of deaths, hundreds of injuries among its soldiers. And that's something in the long run, as Russia faces increasing isolation, could damage the Kremlin's ratings domestically. The fallout, as well as, of course, hurting the global economy. We're seeing rising commodity prices, rising inflation, rising consumer costs as a result of disruptions to supply chains and shipments. And indeed, Russia, of course, has its interests in Ukraine, which it has expressed clearly. Those interests are opposite to the interests of Europe and NATO, of course. And America really has avoided, NATO has avoided direct conflict with Russia in the country. It has, though, sent weapons to Ukraine, as well as not only defensive, offensive weapons as well. And really, as the conflict drags on, it's unlikely the Ukrainian army will be able to win this war against the Russian army directly. But as weapons do come in, this does risk turning into a protracted war, a war of effective resistance against the Russian troops in Ukraine. That's going to be very hard strategically for Russia to maintain in the long run. So, as I said, I think at this stage from these negotiations, certainly at this level, there will be no major decisions taken in terms of demands from either side. This is about simply negotiating ceasefires and humanitarian corridors.
That's right. That's right.
In the long run.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I actually wanted to say that thank you, Daniel, for your words. I agree to some points. Like, for example, we can clearly see that the Blitzkrieg didn't manage to have a success, that Putin thought that he would take Ukraine within 3 days and denazificate it. Well, he didn't manage to. That we see that Russian side is not as strong as they thought to be. We see this clearly by their ultimatums. Nowadays, those are no longer ultimatums, but the terms they're discussing. So if they're having the third round of negotiations, they clearly understand that they are no longer to impose ultimatums, but to discuss the terms we can all agree on. And we see also that I have an outrageous idea that this is neither a blitzkrieg nor a protracted war, because according to the concept of the protracted war, if Russia attacks us, we retreat. If they stay still, we stay still. If they retreat, we attack. Well, it's clearly not what's happening, because we see in Sumy Oblast, in Kharkiv Oblast, that we have really bloody attacks by Russian military troops that are brave soldiers decline, because we see that even though they have managed to capture some cities, even in Kiev Oblast, like Gostomel, Bucha, Irpin, our Ukrainian military troops managed to confront them and to kill all the Russian soldiers, to held captive a lot of Russian officers, not only soldiers, which Russia declines. According to Russia's official data, there are no more than 1,000 of killed. We're not even talking about the captives. And according to Western media and Ukrainian official representatives, there more than 8,000 of killed Russian soldiers and officers. So we see that Russia, we've all been surprised to see that Russia is not as strong as it represented to be. And we see this in Deutsche Welle, which is also banned in Russia nowadays. German-based
Bowden,
media.
I want to have this a quick question to Daniel. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We can talk about that later, okay? Daniel, a very quick question about this, the humanitarian corridor that you have to mention. In the second round of peace talk, the humanitarian corridor has been established for those refugees to evacuate evacuating from this country. But what is your takes on the effectiveness of this humanitarian corridor and where those people can go, and what can we expect it for more such corridors being built in the future?
I think part of the problem, of course, why these humanitarian corridors failed, and as I said, both sides have accused each other of ceasefire violations, is that this conflict is not only between the Russian and Ukrainian conventional official armed forces. There are also involvement, of course, of far-right paramilitary groups, the Azov Battalion among them, for instance, which are perhaps less under the government's Kiev's control than the armed forces themselves. So while the ceasefire may be holding among, as I say, conventional forces, there may be far-right elements, battalions, paramilitary groups, which perhaps have other interests in mind and which may not be party to any agreements negotiated in those talks between Russian and Ukrainian representatives. And the Russian side has accused those far-right nationalist groups of mining roads, mining cities, preventing civilians from leaving, and even accused them of using them as human shields. Now, of course, as I say, the other side has accused Russia of violating those ceasefire, of moving their troops forward. And it's perhaps those two reasons in parallel that have caused that breakdown. I think for humanitarian corridors to work effectively, there needs to be certainly effective monitoring. They need to be looking at bringing in the monitors, the European monitors, which were on that contact line between the Eastern Ukrainian militia forces and Ukrainian army. And perhaps one idea would be to bring those monitors back to effectively keep an eye on the ceasefires on the corridors, because that right now is the absolute priority. And just going back to what Bogdan said, again, I'm not a military expert, but if we compare, for example, this conflict to the war in Iraq back in 2003, and I'm not drawing political parallels here whatsoever, this is purely from a military point of view, because Ukraine has roughly the same population as Iraq, though it is 1.5 times bigger. Back in 2003, when the US invasion of Iraq took place, it took around 3 weeks for US forces to capture most major cities in the country, for the government to fall. But the US, of course, was using so-called shock and awe tactics, using very heavy tactics with bombing from the air, missiles, and its allies as well. And it was facing, of course, Iraq on its own. Ukraine, in this case, had military, financial, political support from Western countries, from NATO. And though the US captured Iraq, certainly the major centers, very quickly, it was afterwards that the problems began, and it was in the years that came that the American armed forces faced a very powerful insurgency from the Iraqis. And that's certainly something that in the long run, the Russian military could also face in Ukraine, despite whatever has happened over the last week.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And Dalia, you with us?
Yes, I wanted to add something to what Daniel said actually about the speed of the operation. He was completely correct to compare it to Iraqi operations. There were 2 campaigns, and actually there US had all the possibilities to do the operation, and they were taking I think the main cities for 3 weeks. And actually comparing to the landscape of Ukraine, Iraq is fully a desert, so there is no forests, no terracones, no zones of the on the complicated landscape. So for US, it took 3 weeks, and actually they were bombing the life in civilian residences. And here, why the speed? First of all, I wanted to note that that is not true, that Russia was expecting to do it quick and now it's longer than expected. This is not true. The second thing, so it is the myth which is now used as also one of the anti-Russian campaign in the informational field. Second thing, that actually the speed of the operation depends also on the strategy of the other side of Ukrainian army, and Ukrainian army started to use the civilian shields in cities. So actually it's installing its arms and its points and bases in the residential buildings with civilians inside, and a lot of times Russia can't respond for the attacks because Russia doesn't want to hurt the civilians. And also what is very important, and which is now the humanitarian question, which is in deep crisis, is the question that Russia even underestimated that there will be such a nationalistic and anti-humanitarian behavior of Ukrainian army. I will not say that it is all the Ukrainian army, not at all. It's national elements which are infiltrated into the Ukrainian army. And there's the expert, UN arms expert, Scott Ritter, who was commenting on the topic of the Ukrainian situation, said that this is not the entire Ukrainian army, which is now on the nationalist, possessed by the nationalists, but the problem is already in if the persons who are officially in the Ukrainian army, like Bandera, who was on the side of Nazis in the World War II, and so
Bandera died in Nazis camp. He cannot be in Nazis troop if he died in Nazis camp.
So you consider Bandera to be a hero?
We see Stalin equal to Hitler. That's why we have different opinions. You see clearly that
Bandera was on the side of Hitler. Okay, he was.
Bandera wasn't on the side of Hitler. Stalin was as equal as Hitler was, because the Second World War started with Stalin and Hitler signing the treaty and entering Poland. So it's not Великая Отечественная война. It's about the Second World War. It's about that Russia actually cooperated in initiating the Second World War, and Russia
see there
to create the Third World
different
War.
interpretation about history, right? Yeah. So
here is very important.
Shall we back to the Ukraine crisis, guys?
Yes. Can I finish the?
Okay, please.
Yeah, conclude your view, and we should stick. We should focus on this currently situation. Okay.
Yeah, about the UN arms expert Scott Ritter, who said that Ukrainian army is infiltrated by the radical nationalists, and here what is now negative surprise for Russian army is the thing that Ukrainian army doesn't let people from Mariupol and Volnovakha to use the humanitarian corridors, and actually they are not letting civilians and foreigners out of the cities. And today there was very important thing which was solved. There was a group of Indian soldiers which were taken by Ukrainian army as a life shield in Kharkov, and finally there was negotiations and they are let out, and now everything is stabilizing in Kharkov. But it's Kharkov, and we have this humanitarian problems with humanitarian corridors in Mariupol and Volnovakha. Here is my point.
Yeah, gentlemen, let's talk about those humanitarian corridors. And the humanitarian corridor has been established, but how do we evaluate its effectiveness? Does that work, or where those refugees can go? Any other obstacles to any other? Is there any other obstacles to keep those refugees from leaving this country?
It looks that Bogdan wants to say something, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Bogdan, you want to talk something about?
Yes,
you want to talk something about this? About the humanitarian corridor?
From the information that we clearly see that Russia uses the so-called humanitarian or green corridors to transfer weapons. So they use the vehicles marked with a cross to transfer weapon, which is judged and thrown upon not only by the whole civilized world, but also by a lot of conventions that Russia violates. We clearly see that Russia violates not only the international law, which Russia actually denounced. Vladimir Putin signed the document which suppresses the international law, claiming it to be inferior to the Russian law, which is also a breaking of all of the possible agreements. We see that Ukrainian army tried to do it, and Ukrainian delegation tried to do it, but to evacuate people here in Chernivtsi, we're helping in the volunteering center to transfer goods to Kharkiv, to the occupied parts of Kiev Oblast. I wanted to also mention that Kiev itself is not occupied, nor are the parts of it, because it's only the parts of Kiev Oblast which are occupied. I also wanted to tell you that you can simply Google the transferring of all of the army weapons and everything that could be transferred from Siberia to Ukrainian territory. So Darius said that it cannot be called a full-scale war because not the whole country is activated. But if we see that from Khabarovsk in the historically disputed region of Russia, we see that there are some tanks being transferred to the Ukrainian border. So we cannot say that it is not a full-scale war. If Russia misuses the green corridors to transfer weapons, we cannot accept that. And we have seen a lot of times in Pridnestrovia, in Abkhazia, in South Ossetia, in the Chechen Republic, that Russia uses the green corridors. There are plenty of evidence to that, to transfer weapons. That's why we want to evacuate civilians. We've actually done a lot to agree to these green corridors, because those are Russian troops, according to Ukrainian and Western medias, who use human shields to protect its soldiers, because it's not
that is
how
very
it's done.
interesting question. That's very interesting question. Actually, we have raised the topic about the different histories, and now I also understand that we with Bogdan has different pictures of the reality. And this is the question I would like to discuss, maybe this program on the other program. This is how the media and the ideology influences the view to the world. So actually, I see now the conflict of Ukraine and Russia as not the conflict, as I said, of two countries, two brotherhood countries, but I see it as the conflict of the blocks. And so that's why it was very important, the declaration of China about of Chinese foreign minister, that the situation in Ukraine has reached a point that China didn't want to see, and that China calls on Russia, EU, United States and NATO to engage in dialogue. So here is the question, actually I would like to pose to everybody, and I would like also to find an answer to myself. What is this conflict now? Is it the conflict of NATO, even when NATO had run away from the direct confrontation with Russia? And if I can I ask this question to all the participants, or maybe to our Chinese experts also, because for me it's interesting to know the full information about that and reaction of China as well.
Or maybe you say something. No, say something. You first.
Well, may I add some words? Because I actually.
Hello, Dmitro.
It's difficult to tell.
Let me just introduce our new guest, Dmitro Bartsev. He is also joining us from Ukraine. Hello, Dmitro.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead. I think you have something to say. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to add some words about humanitarian crisis in Mariupol, because I have people who are stays there for now, and my friend's parents are still there. And they say the people inside the city were ready to go out to use this corridor, but actually Russians were the side who didn't stop sending the shells into the city. That was the problem, because there's a picture from inside of Mariupol, from people who are staying there and who wanted to evacuate, but were not able to evacuate because actually that corridor was not open. And about the conflict of blocks, well, NATO was not the one who initiated this conflict. Because as NATO declared, Ukraine might be a part of NATO in a far, far future. Very far, and that wasn't sure. But Russia took that as an still a way to open the war. I can understand the Russian motivation. It's completely, it wants to ensure its security space. However, Ukraine was actually, before the war, was ready to be a neutral, to get some neutral status if it obtains a kind of guarantee from both sides. If Russia could give some guarantees of security and NATO, to be a neutral for Ukraine with its geopolitical location is, well, vital thing. But as we can see, the guarantees from Russian side, well, it's even not zero, it's minus. It's a minus scale.
So Dmitry, are you expected to see this conflict is going to be over soon, or we're going to turn to a long term?
I think it will be over like within a week, and it will be over even from within Russian top oligarchs, within Russian top companies, which are losing dozens and dozens every day. So it loses billions of dollars every day. So I suppose Russia-Ukrainian conflict will be over within a week, and it will be over from inside of Russian political circles, which understand that war doesn't go as they were expecting. Because as for my opinion, it should be from Russian position, of course, they expected to take Kiev like within 2-3 days.
According to the official information, it's not that's something we had in our head.
Yeah, we have information. We have information from Ukrainian intelligence. We have information. We have papers which were taken from Russian captured from Russian soldiers and Russian, military troops. So we're not expecting to get such a severe confrontation with Ukrainian nation, and for Ukraine, this war has already become a patriotic war.
Okay, so
that's why.
Oh, Boden.
That's why I would draw. If we're choosing between two blitzkrieg or a protracted war, I would say that this is a failed blitzkrieg, because, as Dmitry said, this is by official documents that we have from the captured Russian soldiers, which Russia denies. Russia actually brought a crematorium with them. So they're not only hiding the fact that Ukrainian soldiers have killed a lot of Russian military officers, they're also hiding their bodies, which is a total lack of moral towards the mothers, the simple Russians who suffer from this aggression too, because their sons are sent to fight in another country, which is totally not acceptable, right, Daria?
This is absolutely acceptable because we protect the Ukrainians from the threats which are posed by their governments. I can fully understand that the question of the Western Ukraine, for example, is the question of the total ideological alliance with West. So for the Western Ukraine, yeah, and Kiev also. So I don't think that Kiev will accept now, after 8 years also, the Russian world, and I'm sure in it. I'm sure, of course. But the Russian interest and Russian question is to protect the Russians who live in Crimea, who live in Donetsk, who live in Lugansk, and you for sure, Bogdan.
Why don't you protect Russians?
You will be agree. You will be
from economical losses.
You will be
Boden, please let her finish. Boden, please let her finish, and you can. I'll give you the chance to ask. Okay.
Yes, you will be agree with me, Bogdan, about the thing that the referendum in 2014 in Donetsk passed, and 90% of persons were in favor of having the independence. These are two completely different words, and Western Ukraine is not something which is Novorossiya. Novorossiya and Western Ukraine are the different countries. Kiev is also a different from Novorossiya thing, and after 8 years, of course. So I think that here Russia is protecting the interests of protecting the Russian people who are there, the right for people to speak in Russian, the right to have their own culture. And we're not against Ukrainian. We love Ukrainian culture. You will, I say you because I'm also Ukrainian and I have my relatives there. And I have my relatives in the cities which are bombed and war bombed by the Ukrainian army. And I know what's this. And I have lost my friends there. They were dead in 2014, and I know what is the war. And actually, we're doing the protection. We're not doing the invasion. And of course, for Kiev and for the western territories of Ukraine, there is no interest for.
Yeah, Bowden, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to tell that it is very funny how Putin uses this Russian-speaking population, not Russians, because a lot of people just speak Russian. It doesn't mean that they are actually Russians or of Russian origin, because during the Soviet time and the Tsarist time, we had a huge wave of Russification. Like, I'm sure that Dmitro from Mariupol speaks Russian on a daily basis, but I highly doubt that he identifies as Russian, even though he has what a lot of people would say a Russian surname. Secondly, I wanted to address the fact that in a lot of countries, we're also talking about the countries who are within one bloc with Russia, like Kazakhstan. In the South Kazakhstan, we have a lot of Russian-speaking communities which are being
North Kazakhstan.
Yes,
Kazakhstan.
I'm talking about the Russian minority in the South Kazakhstan, where they're ignored, where their rights are damaged by the locals and by the government. They're not respected. They do not have equal access to everything. Even though in the North Kazakhstan, yes, they live freely and they enjoy more rights than Kazakhstani themselves. Why doesn't Russia interfere with Afghanistan when if people do not denounce their Russian citizenship or Russian origin, they're thrown out of their own apartments? This is a reliable information. Why doesn't Putin defend Russians who are living in Russia, who are suffering from economical losses, who suffer from everything that Putinist regime has done to Russia and Russian-speaking population? Within Belarus too, we see that nowadays dollar has reached its historical minimum and is falling, and it will fall every day. If Putin is so concerned with the Russian-speaking population, why doesn't he address the Russians who suffer from that, the Russian-speaking Russians?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's get back to Beijing.
You got something to say about that, Daria?
Because earlier, Delia.
For sure. Yes.
I remember, Delia, earlier you mentioned about China's stance, right? You want to hear from our perspective from Beijing?
Yeah. Okay, we know this question of Bogdan, and we will speak in the next conversation.
Yeah.
Because I have lots of questions. Yeah, about.
Go ahead.
About
we want to talk as more as possible. You know, we have a lot of more topics to say about this. Okay. Mm-hmm. You want to repeat your question about China?
Yes, I was asking the question about the reaction of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who said in the conversation with the U.S. counterpart Antony Blinken that the situation in Ukraine has reached a point that China didn't want to see, and China calls on Russia, EU, U.S. and NATO to engage in the dialogue. So the question is, do you think, according to the Chinese experts, do you think that there's a possibility of this dialogue, and is NATO still in this process, can be still in this process of negotiations, and what is the perspective of this talk from your side?
Let me answer this question, okay? 中方呢，这个多次就乌克兰危机呢，已经表达了自己的观点。那么概括起来呢，就是中方啊，这个非常同情当前乌克兰这个困境和这个目前的乌克兰和平居民
show the concerns, and also we really care about the people, the Ukraine crisis, and we also understand Russia, their legitimate rights and interests for their country's security. We know this is need to back to the historical reasons, but we firmly oppose the eastern border expansion by NATO. After the end of World War II, NATO, led by United States, has kept drawing lines, expanding its territory to gain more power. The Chinese always oppose this movement. So we want both sides or the concerned parties to solve the current issues on the negotiation table. I hope all the parties, including Ukraine, Russia, the EU, United States, to play a constructive role. We mentioned the constructive role should be construction.
Constructive dialogue.
So both sides need to stay refrained and to avoid the situation, the right now detention to be further escalated. We talk about in the end, people, the Ukrainian people at the end, they are really suffered a lot. So this is China don't want to see. I also want to see who should pay the bill for all of these. So back to the Libya's war. So we need to think about that. NATO throughout the Gaddafi regime. So after the situation, a leader of European people visited China, and we had a communication with him. So my colleague asked a question to him. Libya war ended, but initiated by NATO. So we talk about all these, all the cost, who paid the bill. He said Libya finally paid the bill. And a follow-up question is, Libya is not really a developed country. How come Libya really could have enough money to pay all these costs? Because that destroyed a regime. We talk about France back then. They launched the aircraft carrier.
Its flagship. 所以呢，他就说这个利比亚
So Libya actually has oil, so it's used oil to pay the bill for European countries, and France actually really invested a lot. So it got 20%, 25%. United Kingdom got 15%. Greece, because used its aircraft, the positions, facilities, so also got 10%. So you could tell the NATO actually involved, but Libya finally paid all these costs. Then the question for now is for Ukraine crisis. For right now, this military operation, by the end of the day, who should pay all these? NATO not directly involved, but NATO provide a lot of military weapons, right? Same for European countries. EU also provide these needed, let's say, the weapons. So is EU and NATO actually send this for free to Ukraine, or Russia should pay all these weapons from NATO or EU? Right now, I really want the leader from NATO or EU to answer my question. Then we could know that what's your real attitude toward this crisis.
Who will pay for this the conflict, right? Chalan, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, sure. Even though we don't have very high hopes for the third round negotiation, but I can see both sides are willing to talk, and both parties are confident that eventually they will get there, or at a certain point that they can just solve the conflict with peaceful means. So this is a positive sign. So this is exactly what China wants. As well as diplomacy still works, we should reduce the deaths of civilians, and we should use more negotiation instead of a conflict.
Yeah, Dalia. Hi, Dalia. Well, hello, Dalia.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, did you get those replies from our Beijing guest?
Unfortunately not, because there was no translation and my Chinese is not very good.
I got it. We will be, we'll solve this technical problems later. But basically, well, China's view is still consistent, and this, and we also reiterated that China's view is that this crisis in Ukraine should ultimately be resolved through this dialogue and negotiation. And for more details, I can share with you later. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Very good.
Yeah, and also another interesting another question that has been spread on the social media is about the President Zelensky, because I got this a question: where is the President Zelensky at all? Anyone can tell me this?
It depends on the position. The Kiev will say
of course it will. Yes, it will depend on the position. Of course, I'm sure that Daria has got her own vision.
I don't have any information about Zelensky. I don't have any information about Zelensky. You are
Poland,
in Kiev,
do you have any
maybe
information?
have seen him.
What has been said inside
Russian
Ukraine?
Invasion. I am in Chernihiv in Western Ukraine, which has hosted a lot of refugees like me. I wanted to say it one more time that Zelensky continues to give speeches to our Western and the world journalists, that Zelensky continues to do offline and online through Zoom, through other platforms, meetings with the world leaders. Like now we have received information from the presidential side that he has talked to Biden about the new economical sanctions on Russia. So Russian economy will not only be simply dead, it will be mortified. I don't know how you're going to live with that. I'm sure that Russia is not self-sufficient, because we have information from people who are economical analysts from Russia, and they say political experts like Schulman. Schulman said that she's shocked. She's an all black. Your economy minister was wearing black, which is a symbol of that, because we all know that we can predict the future by. It is a local meme that we can predict a future of Russia's economy by the wardrobe of the Russia economist minister. Secondly, about Zelensky, he has just been to Munich. Now he's probably returning back to Ukraine, because in Munich he was discussing some new economic sanctions on Russia, forming a new coalition to defend Ukraine's sovereignty. So we have certain information that he has not fled, as I already told you, by the U.S. representative. He declined the U.S. offer to evacuate to the United States. He said that he needs weapons, not the right.
Please, okay. Dimitri, please.
I have one question to Daria, actually, because of her answer that Russia protects like Donbas republics, like Lugansk and Donetsk republics, right? I have a kind of question. Yeah, I have this question is a bit tricky, you know, because Russians came to Donbas as a peacekeepers, right? As a protectors of Donbas, right? But
when exactly? Which period we're speaking about now?
No, like just your previous answer that Russians came to protect civilians on Donetsk and Lugansk Republic, right? So I have a question.
No, before the military the military operation was launched in order to do the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. So this two different sides. That was not only the declaration of independence of Donetsk, but this was the launch of special operation after Zelensky was.
Dmitry, what was your point? What was your point? You just say it directly. Can you clearly state your point? What is your point?
My point?
Yeah.
So I have a question to Daria. Russians actually, they declare the first like before, like when the press conference of Putin and all officials, when they take Donetsk and Lugansk Republic as independent states, they declare that they coming to there to protect Russians speaking on Donbass. But actually, if you come to protect, you stop on the borders. You do not invade from north, south, and east of Ukraine, because the main point of ideology of this coming of Russians to Ukraine is protecting of Donbass and Donetsk and Lugansk Republic. Actually, the main point of ideology. protection stops on the frontier or on the border, but it's not when you cross the border.
Yes, and
That's
our questions are pretty similar. So Dmitro agrees with me. So why doesn't Russia help Russians to increase their economical situation? Russians in Turkmenistan, Russians in Kazakhstan, in the north.
Okay, one second. Let's do step by step. Okay, first of all, the thing is that okay, Bogdan, I will answer you because this is a question you have already asked. So about the Kazakhstan, Russia is doing through Россотрудничество all what she can because of these processes which came into power in Kazakhstan, the Russophobic processes, and this also was caused by the massive reorientation of Kazakhstan towards the West. It's interesting that President Nazarbayev had changed the lettering to from Cyrillic to Latinitsa, to the Latin names. Yeah, and actually there was a huge and large process of this reorientation of Kazakhstan towards the West, which of course geopolitically is not positive for Russia, and it also caused the Russophobic processes and the problems with the Russian convoy, as you have been following the story.
What is Russia doing?
Yeah, Daniel, is you with us?
Russia is trying to do diplomatic
Dalia, please finish your Dalia, please finish your review, and I want to turn to Daniel for the next. Okay.
Yeah, Russia is not intervening because the phase is not as critical as it is in Ukraine. And actually the power now, Tokayev, who was also under the threat of coup d'etat launched by President Nazarbayev, who was orientated towards the West and reorientated towards the Western partners. Russia had stabilized the situation and now held talks with Tokayev. But if the situation got worse and there will be the coup d'etat with the terrorists into power, in this case, Russia could possibly think about that. But this is the region of the interest of China, of Russia, of different other countries. And here we have not such a pressure as the West has on Ukraine. So the dialogue will be much simpler and much easier.
Daniel with us in Moscow.
Daria, thank you a lot for these words. I hope Mr. Nazarbayev hears them. Thank you.
Yes, but it's open information that Mr. Nazarbayev was in beginning the defender of Eurasian Empire, and he was quite interesting in his Eurasian views. I know him personally, and I was also visiting his university, and actually that was a very clever, interesting, and very deep person. After he started to try the policy of different orientations, and his members of the family started to do the business with United Kingdom, and deeply side by side he started to be on this triple side. From one side he is pro-Russian, from the other side he is in a collaboration with China, which is not in the contradiction, and from the other side he started to be pressed by the United Kingdom. His advisor was also Tony Blair, and so actually this thing with Nazarbayev was a very interesting thing. But the coup d'etat was not launched by Mr. Nazarbayev. It was launched by the forces who were trying to do the destabilization of the region, and then there were all factors which were used. All factors, according also terrorist elements, but it didn't have a success. And also thanks to Russia, because there was
Hi, Daniel, are you with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, let's get back to this our earlier discussion about this, because our discussion is back to our earlier discussion on the President Zelensky. You have any information from Moscow? Where is President Zelensky?
Look, I will say this. I think we live in an era where often quality of information, quality of news is replaced by speed. Accuracy is replaced by getting information out there quickly, and especially during the fog of war, it is very hard to understand what exactly is going on. And as my colleague said, very early on, there were rumors that President Zelensky had left Kiev, that he was in a bunker. He did receive that offer of evacuation from the United States, and as Bogdan pointed out, he did say, "We need a weapon, it's not a ride." There are now reports coming that he has fled to Poland, but President Zelensky has been releasing a lot of videos on social media showing him walking around Kiev, walking in his office, working, showing that he is in the Ukrainian capital. I would add that regardless of where he is at this time, as the Russian troops do advance on Kiev and will potentially enter Kiev in the coming days and weeks, if Zelensky does leave the country, that will very much be symbolic. I think while the president remains in Ukraine, this remains a conventional war between the Russian armed forces and the Ukrainian armed forces. I think if and when, of course, President Zelensky does evacuate to either Lviv in the rest of the country or further out to Poland or indeed the United States, that will mark a change in what's going on, a sort of watershed moment in this Ukrainian conflict. And it's from that point that this war will no longer be conventional, but will be more of a resistance movement, if you like, by various groups in Ukraine. And of course, that may also impact negotiations, that may impact the level at which negotiations are conducted, that may make the Ukrainian government either more or perhaps even less inclined to accept the Russian demands regarding Crimea, regarding Donetsk and Lugansk. So certainly a lot does depend on Mr. Zelensky's presence in the Ukrainian capital.
Yeah. Back to Beijing. Guys, you want to share something about us? Where exactly is the President Zelensky? Because he has been using the social media to communicate with the outside world. He's been very, very good at using the social media. But it's so hard to confirm where exactly is this location, and so there's a lot of the rumors around this. What do you think of this? Maybe this is a part of the conflict, right?
Yeah.
This is still information is still part of this.
这个实际上也是
Yes,
当前
indeed,
这
you're
个军事
correct.
冲突
I
啊
believe
一个
this
特
is
点，
also
就是
part of the
在舆论战方
current
面，
situation
双方都下了很大
feature
力气
because
的
the both sides you
所以
could
在
see
这个
they
背景下
devoted
呢
a lot of energy
社交
on
媒
this
体
information on
实际上呢已经
social
成为了战争的
media,
一个部
and
分
social media
很
right now
多
has
信
already
息战
become
呢都是
part
在
of
社交媒体上打
the
起来的
war, and also you could see that's information
Zelensky is
warfare.
an actor, so he acts like he is still in. He's in his office, and he always stays in his office with his people. Yeah.
曹老师，这个在这个
Mr. Cao,
战争当中
we
哈，这
know
个发布
that
信息，包括这个
information
义军统帅的这
war
个信
or
息，它的这种
as
发布
the
是
head
也很有
of
讲究。
the
因为之前
country used to
黄总也
become
提
part
到过
of
一个
the
观察，
information
就是说
and
泽连斯基是
really
非常
eager
善于利
people
用
want to know,
互联
and
网媒体
President
去发布信
Zelensky,
息
as
的，
other
但
guests
是
mentioned,
相对比
really
之下，
know how to
普通
leverage
就
advantage
还
of
是会
social
用非
media,
常
but
传统
compared
的
to
保守
that,
的方式
President
啊，
Putin
对，
still
还
use
是
very
用这样的
traditional
方式
media
就是
outlet,
在这个军事当中，这
use
个是不是也
television,
是发布信息也是
video
这么
to
意思的？
release information. What's
应
your
该
take?
说，在现代的战争
The
中啊，
current
已经不像
war
过去
in
仅仅是一种
today's
平台的
era,
对抗，
it's
就
not
是飞机
just
与
like a
飞机
platform
中
to
国制空权
platform. It's like airplane
水
versus
面的舰
airplane,
艇和
a
舰艇
warship
相标
versus
争夺
warship,
制海权，陆地上的
and
坦
the
克其实就是
tanks
陆战之王坦克
versus
在进
tanks
行正
to
面的
get
交
the
锋。
total
我们看
control
到
of
实
the
际上
air,
信
the
息啊，就
ground,
是包括了
the
情报，
marine
还
territory.
有呢
But
就
right
是
now
它
you're looking
发
at
布啊这
information.
些
All
信息。
these
现在我
information
们看到
released
的
on
信息有
various
真有假，
platforms.
为什么会出
Fake
现这样的
news
情
and
况
true
呢？
news
就
all
是要
combined.
动摇对
All
方的军
combined.
心，
The
给
saying is
自
like
己
to
的
hit
这个
others'
军队
morale,
增加
but
士气。
boost
所以
morale
呢，
and the
这
confidence
个
of our
信息
own
里面
military.
不但
So
含
this
有这种
is
军事
really
作
the
战上的
military
情报
tactic
的意图，
and
而
strategy.
且更有
So
对这
you
种
could
士
see this
气
is
的鼓
really
舞
important
和
for
打击对
the
方
morale.
士气的这种作用。
对，所以在这次
For this time, we're looking at the conflicts. Actually, there's a new word to describe.
我当然不太清楚这个英语可能怎么翻译比较好 ，recognizing
recognition
or something 对，这个可能还需要这个再考证一下啊。但是呢，就是
您可以稍微解释一下这个
对，
是什
其实
么意思？
这个
So
本
we
质呢，
talk
其实
about
很
that
清楚，
maybe
意思就是
the
我们对同样一个事
procession
件
of
通过社交
operation.
媒体的放大
So
传播，
basically,
可
the
能就有
same
了不同的
thing
认识。
that by
是吧？
broadcasting
比如
by
说这个
social
现
media
在
platform,
在冲突
people
中
have
是吧？
different
这个
interpretation
关于双方
on
的
the
伤亡是吧？
information
这
or
个
on the
有
same
很多
set
说
of
法也不一
information
致，是吧？
regarding
社交
one
媒体上有
issue
各自的解读，
event.
所以
Of
就形
course,
成了
different
受众
social
对
media
同
has
样一
different
个事件
interpretation,
有不同的认知，
and
而且
one
这种认
event,
知
of
之间的
course,
鸿
people
沟
have
也是
different
非常巨大的。
interpretation,
这个在
plus
电视
the
传播时代呢，
amplified
这
by
种现
social
象呢
media,
可以说是不
then
存在的。当然，在
really
电视
right
时
now
代
things
呢，
go
对
different
同样
directions.
的一个
That's totally
军事啊
different
或者
compared
政治
to
事
the
件，
information
大家
released
可能会有
by
不同的评
TV
论，
or by
不同的
radio.
解读。
So we're looking at the recognition before or a perception of one thing. In the traditional day, people actually have one understanding, but right now you're looking at, based on social media, people have different understanding.
Daniel, I want to ask you this: what do you think is the role? We're talking about the role of the social media that played in this conflict. What's your take on this?
I'm sorry, who do you address?
Daniel. Is he still with us, Daniel?
Yeah.
We just talked about a role of. Did you hear my questions?
I did, yeah. I think certainly social media in this conflict plays a key role in shaping narrative. We have spoken about narrative previously during this live stream, and we are seeing such different narratives and such different viewpoints from both sides. Here, the narrative here in Russia is so different to what we are seeing in Western media, and I think in a lot of Western media, the narrative does appear to be, to a certain extent, that this conflict began a week ago when President Putin woke up one day and decided to invade Ukraine and start a war in Europe, and it simply is not the case. Things do run deeper than that. This conflict does have a history that goes back months and years, indeed back to 2014, 2015, of course, the conflict in East Ukraine, the republics of Bennetts, Lugansk, and certainly social media plays a role in shaping that narrative and also, of course, providing information to people at a time when they seek alternative points of view from the state media here in Russia or the mainstream media in the West. I think people need to see all sides, to use social media effectively, but also very carefully to filter out fake news, to filter out news which is designed to confuse and to give false information, to really try to see all sides of the story and try to look at the conflict as Daria was saying, a conflict of blocks, a conflict with a history, with countries that have interests, as opposed to a simplification of what's going on, that Vladimir Putin is simply, decided to invade Ukraine one day to start a war for the sake of starting the war.
Yeah, I want to add to my colleague, about media, actually, because
go ahead.
Well, I am following Ukrainian media for a long time, since this conflict has begun, and I found one thing. It's a fight when, Ukrainian soldiers, they try to picture, to evidence each tank, each Russian vehicle which were destroyed. It's very important because actually in current situation, somebody can say nobody is killed, and from other side you can see the picture of burned tanks, burned tech, of losses which actually happens. So that's very interesting because yesterday Ukrainian hit nine airplanes, not airplanes, several helicopters and several planes, and each of these was pictured, was evidence from several perspectives to show Ukraine got victories. And from this side, I want to go back to personality of Zelensky. He is a media person, so he has a good team who supports him. What's also very important, because in information field, Russia has already lost this war, because Russian they don't show their victories. The official TV, yes, it shows that not ordinary, not regular soldiers who just picture okay, this bodies, corpses of cars, vehicles. So you can get information from the frontier within an hour or two when the soldier got the connection with internet and he can download all the pictures. So that's actually very important. And this information, these videos, these pictures, these facts, these live interviews with captured Russian soldiers, they are spreading very fast. So and that also influences in the informational side of the warfare, modern warfare, when soldier can do something, show that something, and prove the evidences of what happens.
So is that possible? maybe Russia or Ukraine win the war actually, but they lost it on the social media.
Yeah, there is a meme in the Russian meme field that Russia is in Washington with the Russian flag installed on the White House, and then there is a small note, but we had lost the informational war. Actually, I'm agree with my colleague from Ukraine that the thing is with the informational war there is no symmetry. Russia is in this field not as hard as Ukraine is, but Ukraine is also not alone. I mean that the large amount of the Western technologies were used during this psychological informational warfare, and the Ukraine has a special block of Operation 72nd block operation of informational warfares, and they're doing it very professional as the United States are doing, and there were consultation, I think, from the also American side how to do that. Actually, there is a large use also of the fakes in the Telegram and the social medias. And what here I would like to say that in Russia, for example, if you was opening YouTube or Facebook several days ago, you could see the advertisement which was absolutely ideological, which had the key points which are shared by the Ukrainian government, by the Kiev government. So Ukraine was very good, and their arm was very good in the informational field and in targeting. And here we can see that actually now Russia is a very interesting process of obtaining its network sovereignty. And I think that soon there will be a firewall and it will be the new internet sovereignty installed in our country. We were preparing for it from 2014. And if that happens, that will really modify all the balance of powers in the informational field. Because in the Ukrainian conflict, we have seen Kiev, which was backed by the Western partners, who really gave good lessons of informational warfare, and this was interesting. The problem was that there were a lot of fakes, and Russia started to speak about these fakes and to try to point out what is wrong, what is not wrong, and it was launched by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs now, and we have a special site where we are publishing this anti-fake campaign. But
That's
still,
right.
I think they were very effective in the informational warfare.
But,
that is the latest of things.
But you're telling like from independent internet, that actually means no freedom of speech. That means censorship. That means that actually a Russian will be cut away from the global information field.
It will be cut away from the liberalism.
From all of the information.
From liberalism. From liberalism, from globalism,
freedom,
and we want, and no, it will be cut on also only of the liberal world, of this abstract Soros human rights, and thanks that will be very, very productive, because human rights we see now that they are only
being violated in Russia.
Human rights are different for every country. We are for rights of people, and I think
are Russians free to protest?
Russians, of course, they are free to say their position.
So when
the internet
Moscow in St. Petersburg, so we didn't have police that were spreading them. So like, go home, go home. There was no police.
When the country is conducting the military operation, there is a necessity to have also all the things under control, and the things that the organizer of these meetings were also connected to the foreign engines, and that means that was not only Russian participating there, but also the external forces which wanted to destabilize the situation, as it was in 2014 when you're in a situation in Kiev was destabilized not only by yourself and the other elements, but also the external forces who wanted the total end of Ukraine. And I'm very sorry for you that West is using you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very well, this is another day with this informative discussion. So that makes me looking forward to tomorrow. So let's call this the day. Once again, we appreciate it. all of our guests today, and all of our CGTN reporters, analysts, and strainers around the world. And also, I recommend and welcome you to be part of this conversation by sending your topic and the questions that you want us to talk in this chat room to strainer@cgtn.com. So this is Chat Room. I'm Yan Zhao. Bye for now.
Bye.